To understand why Nazi Germany was called the Third Reich, you first have to know what Reich even means. Reich is simply the German word for empire or realm. So why do we usually keep the German word Reich in English instead of just saying empire? Mostly it's tradition and translation habit. Early historians and journalists kept the German term when talking about Germany's empires, and it stuck. It also helps avoid confusion, since Reich carries a specific historical weight tied to German history, while empire is a much broader, generic word used for empires all over the world. So why did the Nazis specifically call themselves the Third Reich? Simply put, they saw their new government as the third great German empire in history, meaning that, in their view, two earlier Reichs had already risen and fallen before them, and theirs was the next one in line. This idea came from a German writer named Arthur Moeller van den Broek, who wrote a book in 1923 called Das Dritte Reich, or The Third Reich. In it, he imagined a coming new German era that would be the natural successor to Germany's two earlier empires. He wasn't a Nazi himself, but Nazi propagandists loved the phrase. It made their new government sound like the fulfillment of German history and destiny, rather than just one political party taking power. Joseph Goebbels and other Nazi propagandists picked up the term and spread it through speeches, posters and newspapers, and soon Third Reich became the popular nickname for Hitler's Germany, even though the government's official name was simply the German Reich. So who exactly were those first two Reichs that the Nazis were counting themselves after? Let's start from the very beginning. The First Reich was the Holy Roman Empire, sometimes more precisely called the Holy Roman Empire of the German nation. It began in the year 962 when a king named Otto the Great was crowned emperor by the Pope in Rome, an act meant to link his rule back to the old Roman Empire and to give it God's blessing. From that point on, it lasted for more than 800 years, making it one of the longest-lasting political systems in European history. Unlike a normal kingdom passed down through one royal family, the Holy Roman Empire was ruled by a long line of different emperors who were actually elected, chosen by a small group of powerful German nobles known as electors. Over time, though, one family, the Habsburgs, came to dominate the position for centuries, holding on to the crown almost continuously from the 1400s onward. Geographically, it covered a huge and loosely connected patchwork of German-speaking kingdoms, duchies, bishoprics, and free cities scattered across Central Europe. It was never a tightly unified country like modern Germany. Instead, it functioned more like a giant alliance of hundreds of small, semi-independent territories that all technically answered to the emperor. It finally came to an end in 1806 when Napoleon Bonaparte crushed Austria's forces and reorganized much of Central Europe, forcing the last emperor, Francis II, to formally dissolve the empire rather than let it fall under French control. Interestingly, the famous French writer Voltaire once joked that the Holy Roman Empire was neither holy, nor Roman, nor an empire, a line that's remembered today because it captures just how loosely organized and symbolic the whole thing really was. That brings us to the Second Reich, known as the German Empire. This was a very different and much more unified nation than the sprawling Holy Roman Empire, officially formed in 1871 after the Kingdom of Prussia, led by its Chancellor Otto von Bismarck, won a series of wars against neighbours like Austria and France. These victories convinced the many separate German states to finally join together into one country, with the Prussian king crowned as the new German emperor. This empire was ruled by a monarch given the title Kaiser, a German version of the word Caesar. starting with Wilhelm I and later continuing under his son, and then his more famous grandson, Wilhelm II. Geographically, it covered roughly the territory of modern Germany. Under Kaiser rule, Germany rapidly transformed into one of the leading industrial, scientific and military powers in the entire world, building a massive navy and competing with other European empires for colonies overseas. This powerful new nation came to an end in 1918 at the close of World War I, when years of brutal fighting left Germany defeated, starving and exhausted. As German forces crumbled and public anger grew, a revolution broke out at home, forcing Kaiser Wilhelm II to abdicate his throne and flee into exile in the Netherlands, bringing the age of German emperors to a sudden close. After the Second Reich collapsed, Germany didn't immediately become a Reich again. Instead, from 1919 to 1933, Germany became a democracy known as the Weimar Republic, named after the small city of Weimar, where a new National Assembly gathered to write a fresh, democratic constitution, since the capital, Berlin, was considered too unstable and dangerous at the time. On paper, this new republic was one of the most progressive democracies in the world, giving Germans, including women for the first time, the right to vote, along with strong protections for free speech and civil liberties. In practice, though, it was a period marked by huge instability from the very beginning. The new government was blamed by many for accepting a harsh peace treaty that forced Germany to pay massive reparations and take responsibility for the war, which created deep resentment. The country suffered from constant political violence between far-left and far-right groups, attempted coups, and assassinations of prominent leaders. Its economy was hit by a period of runaway hyperinflation in the early 1920s, so severe that people reportedly needed wheelbarrows full of cash just to buy basic groceries. Although the economy stabilized for a few years afterward, the Great Depression that began in 1929 devastated Germany all over again, throwing millions of people out of work. All of this instability, fear, and humiliation left many ordinary Germans exhausted with democracy and increasingly open to extreme political movements that promised a stronger, more decisive, and more unified form of government. It was out of that exhaustion and instability that the Nazi Party rose to power, promising to restore German pride, rebuild the economy, and undo the humiliation of the previous war. In January of 1933, Adolf Hitler was appointed Chancellor of Germany, and within just a few months, he and his party moved quickly to dismantle the democratic system entirely, banning rival political parties, silencing the free press, and concentrating total power in Hitler's hands as dictator. His government proudly adopted the name Third Reich, or sometimes the Third German Reich, to present itself as the next great glorious chapter in German history, a direct successor to the Holy Roman Empire and the German Empire before it. But in 1939, Hitler actually banned the official use of that very name. He felt it suggested his regime, like the first two, was just another temporary phase that would eventually end and be replaced by a fourth. And since he wanted people to believe his empire would last forever, famously promising it would endure for 1,000 years, he ordered the government be called simply the Greater German Reich instead. Still, the nickname Third Reich had already spread so widely, both inside and outside Germany, that it stuck in the popular memory, and it's the name most people use today. The regime itself, though, never got anywhere close to 1,000 years. Under Hitler, Germany rapidly rearmed, expanded its territory across Europe, and ultimately plunged the world into World War II, while simultaneously carrying out the Holocaust, the systematic genocide of 6 million Jews, along with millions of other victims. This brutal period lasted little more than 12 years, from 1933 until 1945, ending in the total military defeat of Nazi Germany, the death of Adolf Hitler as Soviet forces closed in on Berlin, and the complete collapse of the regime he had once promised would last forever.